in FAO. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this first of a series of webinars, technical webinars organized jointly by New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, and FAO, in particular Capacity Development Unit and Decentral Employment Team in the Social Policies and Rural Institutions Division. This is the first webinar. We will be talking today about child labor, ending child labor in agriculture, while we have planned other 3 webinars. The next one will be on youth employment, rural youth employment challenge. It is planned for mid-December. The other 2 will happen early next year, and they will treat about green jobs and links between migration and rural and agricultural development. And we hope to be able to organize them by February and March next year. And of course, you will be notified once the dates are confirmed. This webinar will take about 1 hour and a half. It will be also recorded. We will share the link with you after the webinar. So that is why I would really like to encourage you to go back to registration form so we can have your emails and we can send you all the necessary information, recording, link to a very short survey that we would like you to do in order for us to be able to know if you like the webinar, what we can improve for the next time. Also, after the presentation, I would really like to invite you to type in the chat your questions. Unfortunately, the microphones need to be turned off because of the background noise, but please feel free to comment, ask questions in the chat, and we will try to answer all these questions. If because of the time it will be not possible, we will then collect the questions and then distribute the answers via emails. So don't worry. Unfortunately, my colleague Ariane Gentin, who is a FAO child labor expert, was not able to join us today. She has some health issues due to the rainy and cold weather which we have here in Rome. So she was extremely sorry and she apologizes for that. So it will be only me, and I will do my best not to annoy you. So let me now go to the presentation. As I said, we'll be talking today about child labor in agriculture. We will start by defining child labor, what it is and what it is not, because I think I saw that we are from different backgrounds. We have some people from agriculture sector, from NGOs, but also from employment labor sector. So it is nice that we are all on the same page when we discuss it. We will also see what is the magnitude of the issue of child labor in agriculture specifically, and what is the role of agriculture stakeholders. And here I would really like to stress that we will be talking about agriculture stakeholders, but for those who are not from the agriculture sector, please don't get discouraged, because I think this webinar can be still very relevant for you in order for you to understand what are the peculiarities of agriculture sector, what are the roles and responsibilities of people in agriculture sector, and how you can better engage with them, because collaboration to end child labor in agriculture is key. There's no single organization which can end it alone, and I think it's very important to bring agriculture stakeholders on board, and also for other people from labor, education, health sector to understand how we can all work together. Then I would like to present some capacity development tools that we developed, and in particular ILO FAO e-learning course on ending child labor in agriculture. So what is and what is not child labor? We have to stress that child labor is not, we don't refer to all the activities performed by children. There are many activities which can be absolutely performed by children and also can be very beneficial for them, because this is also the way how people acquire new skills, how children can socialize. However, there are certain things, there are 4 main factors which can make an activity unacceptable for a child. And it takes only one factor to actually make an activity child labor. For example, to start with, if a work engages children below the national minimum employment age for this particular type of work, then we talk about child labor. Because ILO convention and subsequently also national legislation set minimum age of work, and under this age, persons, children, are considered too immature, too vulnerable to be able to engage in work. Also, a work which interferes with compulsory schooling is considered child labor. And even if enrollment rates are quite high, then we discover that dropout rates can be also very high, or children are not able to absorb the information that they are being taught in classroom because they are too tired, or sometimes some type of force can even damage their cognitive capacities to be able to learn. That is why work which interferes with school, with a child's right to go to school, to learn, and to be able also to rest, to be able to learn better, that is considered child labor. Also, many type of works can be very hazardous, and agriculture is one of the most hazardous sectors to work in. And children are particularly vulnerable, much more vulnerable than adults. For example, children breathe much deeper and much faster. That is why they absorb more dust, more chemicals by breathing. And there are many other examples of physiological functions which make children more vulnerable to the same thing than adults. Also, different kind of work, of tasks may be hazardous by nature, for example, like using machinery or sharp tools, but can be also hazardous by circumstances. So we have to also keep it in mind that an innocent task can actually become hazardous because it is performed by night or in a very noisy and, for example, dusty environment. And any other kind of work which is mentally, physically, socially, or morally dangerous and harmful for children is considered child labor. Tasks which are age appropriate, which allow children to rest, to go to school, to study, can be performed and can be very beneficial, as I said before. So it was just as a background, so we are all on the same page. I wanted also to give you an example which is more rooted in agriculture, and it is related to pesticides, which is a very widespread hazard in agriculture. So look at these images here. On the first image, we can see a boy spraying pesticides, and I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that it is child labor. And this boy is definitely a child. He has all the chemicals running into his face, and obviously it's very hazardous. However, on the picture on the right top corner, we have a family scene with a girl washing clothes. It may seem like completely natural, but in this case, we know that the clothes that she's washing were used to spray pesticides. And chemicals used to produce pesticides can be so strong that they can affect her even by touching the clothes which were in contact with pesticides. The reason I'm showing you this example is to stress how much we have to analyze every situation, how much we have to go beyond appearances and look for different factors that can determine whether it is or it is not child labor. These factors may be not necessarily visible. We can, for example, look also at the time when certain tasks are performed, whether it is at night, maybe whether it is during weekdays when supposedly a child should be at school. So there are many different factors that we have to look for. Similarly, for the consequences of child labor, in this case pesticides, we can have immediate consequences like dizziness, vomiting, headache, which in some cases can lead also to acute poisoning and even to death. And especially if you remember that in remote areas, health service may be much more difficult to reach. The road to get to these services, for example, to the next hospital, can be in very bad shape. So every accident is much more difficult to be dealt with. On the other hand, on this fourth picture, we have a situation of adult people who are having reproductive issues, a person who has developed a cancer or has neurological issues, because many times pesticides can have a very detrimental long-term effects, which are even more difficult to link directly to the fact that a person was spraying pesticides many years ago. But there is an evidence that this is related. So it was an example of the pesticides, but I would just wanted to illustrate that there are many hazards in agriculture which can be obvious or less obvious and which can have immediate bad consequences on health for adults, but especially for children. But there are also long-term consequences which can appear only after the years. So let's see what is the global situation of child labor in agriculture. And the situation is not very optimistic because for now we have more than 70% of all child laborers who work in agriculture. In agriculture, meaning crops production, livestock, fisheries, agriculture, and forestry. It means 108 million children worldwide. And it is much more than in the previous reference period, so before 2012. Let's see now some more details about child labor in agriculture. So we see that boys and girls are very similarly affected by child labor in agriculture. It's around chances that a child or boy will end up in child labor is around 70% for both. There are certain differences because, for example, with age, the gender-based division of tasks is more visible, and boys tend a little bit more to be engaged in hazardous work, while girls very often are more engaged in domestic chores, which can be also performed by many hours and sometimes can be also um, hazardous. The problem with the girls is that this type of work is very difficult to be captured in statistics. It's much less visible, and sometimes in the common perception it's not even considered work, but just a part of a daily routine. Children in agriculture can work everywhere, can work on the plantations, in big agri-enterprises, but most of them are unpaid family labor, and they work on small family farms, in small family enterprises, which makes them less visible for labor inspection, for legislation law, and also for statistics. We also know that certain situations can increase incidence of child labor, and that is, for example, humanitarian crisis, armed conflicts. We see that in countries affected by armed conflicts, which unfortunately are quite common nowadays, in those countries, incidence of child labor can be 77% higher than global average, and this is similar to hazardous work. When it comes to Africa, the trend is also very pessimistic because we have registered the increase of child labor, and now 85% of all child labor in Africa is child labor in agriculture. So it leaves us with no excuse. We have to act and address this burning issue. The main causes of child labor in agriculture are for sure rural poverty. As I mentioned many times, most of the times, children work with their parents on their family farms, with their families, because rural people very often simply don't have means to keep their children in school. They have to rely on children to supplement household income. And this is a very worrying and very one of the most important underlying causes of child labor in agriculture. Some other causes is, for example, bad quality of schools, poor access to schools, shocks. Because, for example, if a breadwinner of the family dies or gets ill, very often a child is withdrawn from school and pushed into child labor. On the other hand, in some societies, child labor is considered a normal way of life, a traditional way of life, and very often people are not aware of the hazards. Also, agricultural labor market is structured in a way that somehow facilitates child labor. For example, child labor is considered a cheap labor. Children are considered docile workers, And this can be attractive to some employers who may prefer them over an adult person who may be able to speak up for his or her right or ask for higher wages. Sometimes also in agriculture, there are moments when work becomes very intensive, and because of many reasons, there's not enough adult labor force to meet this demand. There's not enough adult labor force, maybe because of aging of rural population, or because of migration, or because of many other causes. However, in this situation, children may be withdrawn from school, a call to work in the fields or on the fishing vessels or in other agriculture activities. There are also some systems like quotas or piecework, where the more people produce, the more are paid. They have to meet targets. Usually the pay is very low, so sometimes once again they have to rely on their children to help. And there are many other push and pull factors, but in the interest of time, let me to continue. What are the consequences of child labor in general? So first of all, as we saw, child labor as defined previously. So not any type of activity, but this bad, unacceptable activities, which is considered child labor, deprives a child from a right to education and healthy and happy childhood. It means that it's very probable that this child will not have big opportunities in the future. It's very possible there's evidence that child laborers, ex-child laborers have ill health, are less skilled, and they are trapped in poverty. That is why child labor is caused by poverty, but on the other hand, it also perpetuates poverty. Also because, as I mentioned before, it drives down adult workers' wages. In general, child labor undermines rural and agricultural development and needs urgently to be addressed. I know it was very pessimistic and negative, so let me start now on a more positive note on what can be done, and also to tell you what is already being done. I would like now to talk about role of agriculture stakeholders. As I mentioned, it is also, I think it can be also an inspiration for those who don't work in agriculture sector, and also can be very important for all of us, also from education, labor sector, to understand what is the potential of people who work in agriculture, who are related to rural areas, what can be done, and how we can all work better together. So we know that rural areas are very often remote. The technology, the internet access, for example, cannot be very easy. Labor inspection can have a lot of difficulties in reaching rural areas. Similarly, legislation law and other services. However, agricultural stakeholders are a little bit facilitated in reaching these remote areas and people who live there because they have a wide network of institutions and staff and local and district level. They have contacts with producer organizations, farmers organizations, and extension services. We always say that extension services are understaffed, are not sufficient, but still in most countries they are there, and they could play a very important role in complementing labor inspection, in advising employers and parents on why child labor in agriculture is bad and how it can be prevented, what are very simple ways of preventing child labor which poor farmers could easily adapt. Agriculture extension agents could also identify child labor cases and refer them to appropriate services. Agriculture actors have also a capacity to communicate with other people working in agriculture. They know what argument can actually convince a big agriculture employer or a person from the Ministry of Agriculture. Very often they are also the ones who know how to speak, who have also the staff capable to speak and to discuss with parents, with poor rural communities. And this is very important because they all need to be on board to fight child labor in agriculture, from the Ministry of Agriculture to parents and communities. It is also very important to note that child labor in agriculture needs to be integrated in agricultural sectoral policies and programs, because hardly ever we have a policy or program which is child labor neutral. And by integrating child labor considerations into them, we can actually achieve a larger impact, a larger scale impact. Lastly, but not leastly, agricultural stakeholders can have also technical expertise and understanding of the sector, which is very peculiar and complex. So they can be very helpful in identifying when and in what situation children work, and what could be alternatives, for example, labor-saving technologies which reduce demand for child labor. And these are technical things which apparently may seem not related to child labor, but can have a huge impact in identifying and addressing the issue. And this is particularly important because we know that one of the Sustainable Development Goals is on decent work, and there is a specific target, 8.7, which calls for taking immediate actions to addressing forced labor, but also worst forms of child labor and any form of child labor by 2025. So we have 7 years, not so much. So we have to really start working on this. Just very briefly, what FAO is doing in this regard. So our main goal, maybe role, let's say, is actually to facilitating the dialogue between agriculture stakeholders and labor stakeholders, like to bringing these two sectors together so we can join hands and work together. And here, beyond labor and agriculture stakeholders, I mean also education sector, health sector, children's rights, and many, many others. We are trying to provide policy support at national, regional, and global level. At national level, for example, we worked in Malawi, Mali, Niger, and Tanzania. We provide technical support to different organizational FAO units which work on technical aspects of agriculture, for example, fisheries, forestries, and others. We also provide technical support to countries and to large agricultural programs so they can actually effectively include child labor considerations and make sure that the impact of these programs will be positive on decreasing child labor. We have been also carrying out work in different countries. I would cite here several African countries like Malawi, Tanzania, Mali, Niger, and Uganda. For example, in Uganda, we work on very much on studies related to legal barriers and occupational safety and health. We strive to mainstream child labor considerations into FAO but also global and international instruments and guidance, like for example, Conference of Parties of Rotterdam on pesticides or International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management. We also generate knowledge, for example, on the topics which are maybe a little bit less covered, like a specific age group 15 to 17, which is a group, let's say, a little bit in between youth and children, because very often they are already legally eligible for work if a country sets a minimum age for employment at 14 and 15 years old, but they are still under 18. So their situation is very specific, and FAO works to generate more evidence on how to address their specific needs of this age group. And we work very much on capacity development. And now I would like to present a couple of tools which we developed. So for example, you can see the image here of this calendar. This calendar was developed by my colleagues and national counterparts in Malawi. And this is a very interesting example because it is a calendar which shows different activities, different agricultural activities throughout the calendar year, and what are the possible risks and hazards of these activities. And this is a very simple and effective way to communicate with people and to sensitize them to different risks. I would also like to present the e-learning course, which I mentioned already several times. This is an e-learning course developed by ILO and FAO. This is a joint product. It is called Child Labor in Agriculture, and the main idea behind it, the main, let's say, goal was to provide a very practical and targeted guidance for different job profiles. So the design of the course started with a deep job analysis to understand who is doing what in agriculture, who could and should be doing what in order to contribute to eradication of child labor in agriculture, and what are the skills, what is the knowledge needed for these people in order for them to be able to effectively work on child labor in agriculture. Thus, we identified 4 main profiles, but like I said before, this course can be also very relevant for other stakeholders. But the 4 main figures that we had in mind were agricultural policy makers and advisors, agricultural program designers and implementers, agricultural researchers, and statisticians. However, many topics can be interesting for labor stakeholders, for people from education sector, people working on youth or children's rights, employers and workers organizations, and so on. You can find this course on our e-learning platform, and now I will show you how to access it. I will ask my colleague to help me with let's say technical issues. Okay, just a second. So this course is available at the our FAO. Okay, sorry, can you hear me again? Can you see my screen? Okay, great. So like I was saying, you can access the e-learning course from FAO thematic webpage on child labor. There is a link here. You have to register here, but it's very easy, and I think most importantly, it's completely out of charge. I already have my profile, so I will register from here. And I would now like to show you how this course looks like online. You can go to the menu of different courses that FAO offers, select child labor category, and you will see 3 courses. There's one main course, and child labor in agriculture, which I will show you in a minute, and 2 mini courses on pesticide management and business strategies and public-private partnerships. So let me open this one. You can see some basic information about what the course is about, what is the length and the structure, and you can access it online. The course was designed in a way to make it as interactive as possible, as appealing as possible. So we have different multimedia, animations, knowledge assessment tests to, let's say, retain attention of the learners. It is structured in 7 units. The first one is an introductory one on main concepts and definitions related to child labor, also on legal framework and hazardous work. The second one is on agriculture stakeholders. Who are they? What are their respective roles, responsibilities, and interest in child labor, and also power relations with others? We usually recommend that these first 2 units are taken by everyone, and I think the unit 2 on stakeholders can be very interested also for people from outside agriculture sector, because it can really give you a better understanding with whom you are going to work. Unit 3 is about assessing and generating data and knowledge. So it's very specifically targeting agriculture statisticians and researchers. And an important thing to note is that this unit is providing not only guidance on how to collect data, but on the situation on the ground, on what is child labor in agriculture today, but it also encourages and provides tips on how to research for viable alternatives to child labor. Unit 4 and 5 is on incorporating child labor considerations in agriculture policies and programs respectively. Unit 6 is on child labor sensitive monitoring and evaluation, because as we said before, it is very unlikely that any program can have no impact on child labor. Usually this impact is there, it can be unintended, it can be positive, and in this case we have to be aware of this to be able to maximize this impact. But very often this impact can be negative, and we have to also have indicators and system in place to be able to take corrective actions. It is also very important because by doing so, we learn, we can document good practices, understand what works and what does not work. Unit 7 is once again a little bit for everyone, and is about developing capacities with regards to child labor in agriculture and communicating effectively. And this is also very important because we have different agriculture audiences, and sometimes even means of communicating should be targeted. For example, like if we are communicating with poor rural communities, we have to adopt certain techniques, not only arguments, but also certain techniques which facilitate the communication and dialogue. And this lesson provides very practical and concrete examples on how to go about it. Let me just very briefly show you how the course looks like inside. So you can see that it's quite colorful, the animations, but this is all very important in order to retain attentions of users. There are a lot of pictures which can have also, let's say, pedagogical purpose. Yes. So very briefly, this is the knowledge assessment tests and other functionalities. Links to other resources. Then I would like to show you also the other 2 mini courses, which, like I said, should be taken in combination with Unit 1. The first one is on the pesticide management and child labor prevention. And it is also very practical. It provides concrete guidance how to, let's say, provide alternatives to pesticide management or protect children from use of pesticides. The third course which we have available is on the business strategies and public-private partnerships. Okay. And now I have to once again request technical support to go back to the presentation. Okay. Thank you so much. So why we are actually putting so much effort in advertising this course? First of all, because we think that it's a very effective tool to sensitize and capacitating people. Um, and it can be very effective also for people who work, because it allows a high degree of flexibility. You can go through course at your own pace. You can go back, you can interrupt, go back and review certain topics which are of your interest. You can also select the lessons that you think are relevant for you. On the other hand, if you are responsible for capacity development in your organization, it can be also very useful for you, because it ensures that you have one source of validated by experts knowledge. So you are sure that your colleagues, your staff is learning from one source. You can reach a very large audience because it's available in many languages. It's available, for now, the main course is available in English and Spanish, but in these days, probably at the beginning of next week, it will be also available in French, and we'll also let you know when it is published. Pesticide management course is available currently in English, French, and Spanish, and very soon in the coming days will be also available in Portuguese, and early next year in Arabic. So I think it's also very relevant. Another advantage of e-learning course that you can either take it online, so it really saves money because you don't have to organize big face-to-face events, but also it can be downloaded from internet or distributed on pen drives. So people who live and work in remote duty stations can still benefit from this. Therefore, it is very cost effective. Some ideas on how actually it can be used and can be applied in capacity development. It is, for example, individual learning, as we said before, but also blended learning. What you could do, for example, if you are designing any kind of training, also training which is not directly related to child labor, you can ask people to go through, for example, the unit 1, which is an introductory unit, before the face-to-face event, so it brings everyone to the same level of understanding. You can then discuss more in-depth and context-specific issues during the face-to-face event and ask people to continue afterwards so they can retain better the knowledge. So this is, for example, one way of doing it. You can also use it as a kind of interactive presentation during your face-to-face training. You can also get inspiration from there by reusing tests, reusing animations. Also, like in terms of some concrete examples of use of this course, it is very important to think about, for example, universities. We are already collaborating with University of Cape Town, which organizes a master for employees of pesticide register. And students of this master are following the main curriculum, and in the meantime, in parallel, they can take also the course on pesticide management, and then they have an online session with an FAO expert. So this is also a great way of highlighting specific aspects in a course which is not on child labor, which is on pesticide, but then you can introduce very easily and in a cost-effective way this little model on child labor. There's also a huge potential, for example, for private sector, especially for the lesson on business strategies and public-private partnerships. We presented this mini course to private sector forum in Geneva, and it generated a huge interest because more and more big companies realize that child labor, being associated with child labor, is very bad for the image, and also it doesn't improve the productivity. That is why they were very interested in using this course to train their staff, but also their suppliers. On the other hand, for us, it's also good because big companies may sometimes be interested in fighting child labor just to protect their image. While we know that by using this course, they will actually be trained on concrete actions that they can take, because they can take a lot of actions to address the issue. And this course makes sure that concrete guidance on preventing and reducing child labor is available for people working in private sector. There are some other publications which FAO produced on child labor. Some of them are sector specific, for example, on livestock and fisheries and agriculture. And this is very important because agriculture subsector can be very different one from another. So it is very important to know exactly what are the realities of communities, for example, depending on fisheries. How can be different fisheries, like inland fisheries, from aquaculture or sea fisheries? What are the peculiarities of livestock of communities depending on livestock production, which may be very often nomad, for example. So all this information have to be specified, and this publication provides concrete guidance on them. We have also guidance on addressing child labor in protracted crisis, because as we saw, protracted crisis increased dramatically incidence of child labor. And this in particular is a very practical and condensed guidance, because we know that people operating in such contexts are people who work on emergencies, so they need really to be able to introduce concrete steps in their day-to-day, let's say, work related to emergency. We have also publication on a handbook on monitoring and evaluation, which is sensitive to child labor, which I also invite you to use in your programs. Another one is Youth and Agriculture, Challenges and Solutions. This one is available also in French and Spanish. So I think it's also very important to mention. And it is about youth, but we know that some people who are below 18 can be already legally eligible for work. And it's very important to facilitate their access to decent work, and also to relevant agricultural training, relevant training in business skills, and apprenticeships. And this publication provides concrete cases from countries across the world, which introduces innovative practice on how to facilitate employment, but also how to facilitate access to training, skills development. So I think this is really a mine of great ideas for people both working on child labor, on 15 to 17 years old group, but also for youth employment. And another publication which I would like to show you, and I will need to share the screen once again. Okay. Is a visual tool on pesticides. It's a visual tool for facilitators. You can download it for free from our thematic child labor webpage, and it's available for Africa. We have available 3 versions, which is in French, English, and Portuguese. So let me pick French. You can see that it's very image-based. The images that actually you saw before on pesticide example were taken from this publication, from this tool. And it's a great tool because it shows in a very self-explanatory way what are the risks related to pesticides, what is the situation that children can be exposed to pesticides. For example, by assisting adults who mix pesticide, or by mixing them themselves, by working on the fields, by using, let's say, not professional ways of applying pesticides, although children should never apply pesticides, by spraying pesticides, and so on. On behind each image, there are concrete guidance for facilitator, concrete exercises that facilitators can use. And it's of great importance because this tool can be used in working with rural communities, at schools, and even investment in translation to local languages is not so necessary, because as long as a facilitator can understand and is trained, then images, let's say, speak for themselves. So as I said, you can download this tool, and I think it's very important to make sure that essential agents are aware of this, and NGOs who work with rural communities, teachers at schools are also aware of this and can use it. Okay, now, okay, let me go back to the presentation. Sure. Okay. Okay. So this is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that it wasn't too boring. It's a really a pity that we didn't have our colleague Ariane with us, but I hope that it could be still useful for you and that you will really go to our website and look for these publications and then be able to use it either for yourselves but also to work with your colleagues. Now we have still some time left, so I would like to see if there are some any question and comment. Yes.